Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise.
Welcome to Stop Now. I'm Nate.
Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa.
Hey, Melissa. It is good to talk with you again. How have you been since our last episode?
I've been okay, Nate. I've been okay. It's with the say the least, but I'm trying to manage. Doing all right. How about yourself?
Yes, I think that is the mantra for 2021. Always forward, regardless of what happens. We still have to continue moving forward. And to that point, JK, I believe we've got some exciting things to talk about here on the show today.
Absolutely. So today we have Christopher Johnston. He has published more than 3,000 articles in numerous regional and national publications. These range from Cleveland Magazine, Crane's Cleveland Business, Inside Business, Northern Ohio Live, and the Plain Dealer to American Theater, Balanced Living, Christian Science Monitor, Continental, Credit.com, Progressive Architect, Photo Magazine, Scientific American Online, Time.com, and Urban Design. He served as a contributing editor for Inside Business for more than 6 years, and he was a contributing editor for Cleveland Enterprise for more than 10 years. That is quite a resume there, sir.
I'm old.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Nate.
Yes, we're glad to have you, Christopher. Yes, Melissa, yes, he has more credits than your local bank. So we are glad to be able to talk to this gentleman today. Before we kind of get started on the topic at hand, Christopher, Melissa and I were just kind of talking about 2021 and making it a better year than 2020. So before we get started in depth, what is your thoughts on last year and just kind of everything that we went through as a country?
Well, I think my hope is that we've learned a lot. We've seen things that were there, obviously, and have been for many years, but people were afraid to talk about them. People were, if they have racist perspectives, they weren't willing to talk about them or talk about how we get beyond this. So I'm hoping that it's been a learning experience. Obviously, we're still dealing with the pandemic, but we have the vaccine now, so that should start to slow it down at least. And hopefully, I'm hoping a year from now we'll be in much better shape. But I think for me, it was interesting as a journalist because it raises all these issues of what we need to talk about and how, and what I look at is what editors and readers are interested in. And so I look at different publications that I could possibly pitch or write for. And I have more ideas than I could possibly ever pitch because it's just been so volatile and so many things going on that need to be addressed. But one of my focuses has always been to try to find the positive. So I'm kind of in this realm now of what they call solutions journalism. And we try to look at the whole story, not just, gun violence is horrible, but what do we do about it? Who are the people? Who are the programs? What are the programs that are actually solving those challenges that we have? And some of them seem intractable, like things that I write about, sexual violence, human trafficking. But I always believe there are solutions there, and I find them in the people who are out there, the good people, the white hats, however you want to label them, who are doing good, heroic work and helping on a daily basis. And so that's what I love to write about, is to identify those people. And I think we need a lot of people to step up now and address some of these deep-seated issues and challenges that have been, unfortunately, have been enhanced by or brought out by the current presidential administration. So we've seen much more division and destruction and chaos and anarchy and things that we may not see at that level, but they've always been there underneath. And so that's what I'm hoping to write about more, is how do we solve those? How do we correct those? How do we deal with that and move forward, not backward?
Well, yeah, because I think one of the things Melissa and I've talked about a lot on this show is we were dealing with two pandemics last year. Like one that was new, which was the coronavirus, but then the other was kind of the pre-existing condition of America and race, and America and how it treats poor people, and America and how it treats people that, maybe from different countries. And so all of that stuff just kind of came together last year. And you're right. Like there's a lot of stuff that was kind of hidden that
Yeah.
people had to, reckon with last year.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, there was no avoiding it. I mean, I think in the past, in my whole lifetime, it's been an issue. And I grew up in the 60s and, saw the civil rights movement and Vietnam War and how we addressed that, protested, whatever. So it's always been there. And shootings, police shootings have pretty much always been there. But people, it was right in your face because of the administration, because of George Floyd. I'm so glad that was caught on video. It's so horrific. And if you look at that and think that that's okay, then you're the problem. I mean, that's it. But anyway, it got really pushed into our faces in a number of cases, not just George Floyd, but so yeah, I mean, those are things we need to discuss. We need to talk about as human beings, as people, as Americans. And so that's what I try to do in writing, but it goes way beyond that, what we need to do.
So speaking of writing, tell us about your book.
Sure. I wasn't planning to write the book. Somehow they just come about from work you're doing. And so in 2009, here in Cleveland, where I live, we had a horrible serial killer case. He was also a serial rapist. And he was caught, and a friend of mine who is a crime writer more than I am, that's kind of his beat, asked me to co-author a book about Anthony Sowell, this serial murderer. And I really didn't want to. I don't like to write about the crime and the criminal. I do like to write about the solutions and the people who are providing them. But it was intriguing to me, and I wanted to see if our city would step up or sweep it under the rug. And fortunately, we did step up. And so I started to write about how Cleveland responded in terms of the police, prosecutor's office, and right around that same time, Joe Biden started the sexual assault kit initiative. And so that became a national endeavor, and Cleveland prosecutor's office was working with other cities. So I wrote about that. I did a piece for Christian Science Monitor, a cover story, and it got great response. And that's when I started to realize, okay, this is national. It's not just Cleveland. There are people across the country, and they're working together. And so I started to put together a book proposal, and my agent liked it, and we got good response. And so that the whole process took about 8.5 years to actually get it researched, written. I traveled the country, attended conferences, did all kinds of things. But because everybody was kind of networked now, the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative task forces, and Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland, has one of the best. They have the best conviction rate in the country, is something like 92, 93%, which is unheard of. Especially in rape cases, it's usually 10% if you're lucky. So I was writing about them, and the people here at Cleveland Rape Crisis Center is one of the best resourced in the country. Sexual assault nurse examiners were starting to emerge as a profession and starting to grow, and people were learning about what they were, what they did, what services they provide that are so essential. So all of those pieces came together, and so the book is about primarily Cleveland, but also Detroit, which has done some great things. But Portland, Oregon, other cities that have moved along in this direction to help people who've been sexually assaulted or raped, and also to pursue the offenders.
And the book is called Shatters Silence. Shattering
Silences. Yeah. I started to hear that as I went to these conferences, and all these, advocates and prosecutors, sexual assault nurse examiners, law enforcement, we're talking about enabling women or any it could be men, it could be anyone, but primarily women, uh, enabling them to tell their story and have it taken seriously by law enforcement and the justice system, but also to help them recover by working with therapists, counselors, advocates. So that's, I kind of looked at both sides, not just the law enforcement side, but what was being done to help victims become survivors and help them regain their lives. And there's just, we don't realize there's this significant infrastructure in the United States to help people. We don't hear about that enough. And so a lot of people don't know about it, or they're afraid because they've had issues with law enforcement, with police, they're afraid to report. And so hopefully that is starting to loosen a little bit because of the good work that's being done. So there's a lot of good things happening, and that's really why I wanted to write the book, to get that out there.
Well, you talk about helping people and being solutions oriented, Christopher. And one of the things that we have talked about a lot on this show, Melissa and I, and some of our guests, is the problem of human trafficking.
Yep.
And for those that don't know, like, January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month.
Yes.
And so I guess before we kind of get to your thoughts on that, like, what's your definition of, human trafficking, and who do you feel are kind of the most vulnerable to be trafficked?
Well, two things. Just the basic law is that, and this is it's the federal law, but it also depends on the states, but that it's someone is forced to prostitute themselves. There's labor trafficking, there's sex trafficking. I have focused on sex trafficking, which was someone being forced by forced fraud or coercion into selling themselves, becoming sex workers. And I got introduced to that through my work in sexual violence, because there's a lot of crossover in the prosecutor's offices, the police, FBI, everybody's kind of the attorney general's office in Ohio. So there was a crossover, and I started to meet some of those people too, the trafficking task force guys and stuff. So, but it really, that's exactly what traffickers do. They identify the person's vulnerabilities. So it could be poverty. It could be they've been sexually abused in the past, and so they're more vulnerable. They could be from another country, and so they're easily they're afraid that they're going to be identified, or taken care if they don't have their papers. So they pick on all those. There's a whole I've been writing recently about some of these guys identify women or people who have intellectual or developmental disabilities, and they're very easy to take advantage of. So that's what they identify. They find people who may have warrants out for their arrest, and they'll say, well, I'll turn you into the police if you don't do this. So they find ways to manipulate. They might have a drug addiction. They find those vulnerabilities. That's typically who's going to get kind of forced into that world. But it's across spectrums. It's in the suburbs. It's not, people sometimes think it's just in the inner city, and that's true. But there are also there have been people from wealthy families, especially kids. Kids don't know, and the guy says, "I'm going to kill your family if you don't do this." So it's just, they identify those vulnerabilities, they take advantage of those vulnerabilities, and it's a horrible, horrible, dangerous, violent world. And so it's also known as modern slavery, and the estimates range all over, but there's some who believe that worldwide there's more than 40 million people enslaved, either labor trafficking or sex trafficking. And so I was just, as I learned more and more about it, I became more and more appalled that these people are being taken advantage of. They're being abused, tortured, raped, sometimes murdered. And it just seems like people kind of turn a blind eye. And so that's why I want to write as much about it as I can and just raise awareness. And again, I've found this network worldwide, but mostly in the US, that I work with, that are doing everything they can to raise awareness and to work with survivors and help them recover, it's a long process because they're suffering complex PTSD and they still may have addiction, and it's just very complicated and not always successful, but there are success stories, and hopefully we can keep helping them as people learn more about it. And just yesterday, Greyhound announced that they will give free rides home to any child who has run away. So which is really an incredible. We need more of that. We need more corporate people to stand up. There are people. There's an organization that is now working with banks and hotels and large corporations to root out trafficking. They can find it through the financing and the way things work, and let them know, because especially hotels are now becoming liable because some of these people are being trafficked to that, through that hotel. They're using their rooms.
Right.
And so then the families find out.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, they come back, they sue them, so they're realizing we need to protect ourselves. So there's again, a lot of good things happening, but we need a lot more.
Yes, making more people accountable to. I like that. That's a good one. So, like you said, people try to turn a blind eye to these situations. So different people need to raise more awareness. What made you become so passionate in the first place to start, to choose this sensitive topic over the business side of journalism or something?
Well, I think I was at a point in 2009 when I started to get into the sexual violence side. I was at a point where I had written pretty much everything under the sun. I'm also a playwright, so I do a lot of playwriting. Sometimes they're docudramas, sometimes they're just creative original pieces. But so I felt like I wanted to go somewhere new. I wanted to use my journalism to help people more. And I've always done that. There's always been stories I've done about veterans or, whatever it might be. But I just felt that it's an opportunity for me to help out in a way that I can't. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. But I can teach about it. I can do public speaking. I can write about it. And so that's really, the deeper I got into it, the more appalled I was that we turn a blind eye, or that's, not that important, or, they'll get over it, and no, it's horrible, horrible violence, child sexual abuse, domestic violence, all these things that people, and it isn't even, sometimes it's just overwhelming. I think you don't know what to do. You don't know how you can help. But I think even just learning about it. And so if someone is hurt that family member, a friend, a neighbor, just even that you can respond with compassion and understand what trauma does to a person. So those are the things that I want to continue to write about. And the response I got from the community too, the people working, they were excited because there aren't a lot of, especially men, there aren't a lot of men writing about it. It's primarily women, and that's cool, but we need everybody, and we need more men to step up, because men, I'm going to be honest, men are the problem. Men are doing, this is predominantly done by men, the sexual violence side, the trafficking side. There are women involved, sometimes as assistants or even as pimps, but we got to be honest, it's men. And so we need to look at, and I have a good friend who writes about education. She's looking at, okay, how do we raise boys differently? How do we get them to be more compassionate, to consider women as equals as they are? They're everybody, we're all human, we're all equal. And so we need to get that out too. And so, but I have this innate sense of justice that was kind of inculcated in me by my parents and my family, my uncles, my aunts. And I have a deep love of women also from my family. I just have so much respect for the intelligence and the compassion and the awareness of life that sometimes men don't have in the same way. And I look at the world and I see everything from global climate change to racism, gun violence, all these things. It's not going to be one person who corrects this. It's got to be all of us working together, helping each other. Everybody has something to contribute. So again, I just feel like this is the way that I can contribute to try to write about these people. And who's being hurt and who's helping, who's providing solutions. It's just, again, it's because it's so offensive to me that anyone could treat people this way and think it's okay, or think it's okay to make money. Because the people who are trafficked never get anything out of it except abuse and hurt, and they possibly could be killed. So they're not getting anything out of it, no matter what the trafficker tells them. It's a lie, and they take their cell phones, they take their wallets, they take their identity. They control what they eat. If they eat, they they manipulate their drugs, if they're using drugs or alcohol, whatever. So it's so offensive, so barbaric to me that it's something I want to help however I can.
I'm glad that you brought up, the responsibility of the men in these situations, because one of the things that we talked about on our last episode, Melissa, was, particularly when you talk about like Black and brown communities, like there's a lot of trauma that has gone undealt with, particularly when you talk about men. And then so what does that do? Like, it's got to come out somewhere. It's got to manifest in some way, shape, or form. And so a lot of times it's brought out in a hurtful manner, particularly towards women. So like when you look at this issue, like what, I guess maybe not even so much from like the pimp side of the situation, but from these survivors and these victims that have gone through this thing, like how tough is it to get to the other side with dealing with that trauma?
Yeah, it's incredibly tough. We have a tremendous resource here in Cleveland, the Renee Jones Empowerment Center. And Renee Jones is as close as I'll ever get to Mother Teresa. She's just this wonderful, wonderful person who's been doing this since 2002. It only became it was only against the law federally in 2000, which is absurd. Wow. Also, in Ohio, we didn't get to that law until about 2010, and then it didn't get enacted till a year or two later. Anyway, Renee has been working with survivors since 2002, and she has this center that's just works miracles with these women. She works with women. I guess if a man came in, she would help because that's who she is, but she works primarily with women, and she has a handful who've been working with her for 7, 8, 10 years or more, and I think they are doing okay. But she has women who come and go too, because it's just very difficult. They've been through so much. And a lot of it is, maybe they grew up in a family where they were being abused or suffering other detriments and things. But trafficking is so horrible and so difficult to get beyond physically and mentally, emotionally, because when they come out, when they do get out and they get into recovery, they probably don't have a solid education. They're going to have a hard time finding housing. They're going to have a hard time finding employment. They're still dealing with addictions, mental health issues. So it's just a vast arena of challenges that they have to overcome. And so that's people like Renee and her staff and the people she works with. And there are others. The Salvation Army here has a huge action foundation, started a special recovery unit there that has detox. Cleveland Rape Crisis Center does a tremendous amount of work. They have a hotline for people being trafficked and so on. And so that's just in Cleveland. There's a national network. Polaris Center does a great deal. They operate the national trafficking hotline. But it's a very complex thing to overcome. It's not like scraping your knee. It's not like falling off a bike, which some people seem to think. It's a tremendous. You've been tortured. You've been raped. You've been raped every day, 10, 15, 20 times for 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. How do you overcome that? It's just a tremendous horrible situation that they have to deal with. And
it's not a straight line, right? Like recovery is not a straight line.
Nope. No, it's like, I mean, even if you just have an addiction and nothing else, how difficult that is for someone just to, get off of drugs. Now you layer in these 5, 6 other things that have happened to them, and it's incredibly complex. What they suffer is horrendous. And even if it's a short time, even if it's a couple months,
Mm-hmm.
it changes them forever. So just now you throw them in, if it happens to them 5, 6, 7 years, and they survive that, which is an accomplishment. Now you have to get out of that. You have no credit record. You have nothing to build on, no employment experience that you can build on. So it's just, you see it's across the boards, and they, like our specialized docket court in Cleveland, the judge has a whole staff of people who look at all those issues. Do they have housing? Do they need addiction services, recovery services? Do they have mental health issues? Do they have a car? Can they get a car? Can they get to work if they get a job? So, they try to look at the whole person. They look at it holistically, which is really important. And they meet every week before her court, or every other week, I guess it is, every other Monday. And they discuss each person, and then they come in, and it's they try to decriminalize them too. And sometimes they have other crimes they've committed either because of the trafficking or outside of that, but they try to decriminalize the prostitution side of it so that that's not being held against them since they were forced into it. But again, just from the little I've said, you can see how complex it is and all the time that it takes, and some never recover. It's just the reality of it. Some recover partially.
Do you think that, with the different people like Renee and, people like you and Stop Now putting all of this out there and bringing more awareness, over time, do you think that this will come to an end? Human trafficking will eventually be done?
Boy, if it is, it's going to take a while. I do hope it can be significantly reduced. Something I've been looking at, I'm working on a piece now. I'm shadowing the trafficking task force here in Cuyahoga County and looking at it from the demand side. And I think that's where some significant change can happen, because if men realize they're not going to get away with this, they're going to get caught, their car is going to be impounded, it's going to be published publicly so that their boss sees it, their spouse sees it, their kids see it, their neighbors see it. I think that's a way, and it's starting to happen. Ohio has legislation pending that they would have a database, a public database of Johns. And in Columbus, the Trafficking Task Force refers to them as predators. And I think that's a sea change if we can look at these guys as predators, because what they do is enable the violence that's being committed against these women, these people who are being trafficked, to continue. Now, they don't think that. They won't acknowledge that. They won't articulate that. But that's
that was going to be my question. Like, do you think that there's enough made of what these women are going through, or is that just a disconnect for these men?
Yeah, I think everybody thinks, they're just having sex, whatever. And A, it's rape. It's not sex, it's rape. And B, they're being beaten, tortured, denied food. They're forced to wear the same clothes that the other women in that little group, that house, are wearing. I mean, it's just absolutely horrific. And if people think about, that's my daughter, that's my niece, that's my mother, that's my grandmother, that's my neighbor, I think we can hopefully start to get people to look at them as human beings, not just toss-offs that are being taken advantage of, and somebody's making money off them.
Yeah.
And so, I think I'm looking at the demand side now, because I think that's where a big change can happen, and it's starting to percolate. We're not really far enough along, but I think people have to be held accountable, not just the pimps, the people who are buying these services. And that's what you're doing. You're buying a human being. There's nothing, it isn't a date. It's not, just not knockoff sex. It's
This isn't Pretty Woman.
No, yeah. I mean, and that happens too. I mean, guys with money, judges, senators, whoever, that's how they do it to get away with it. They have a relationship with someone that they're paying a lot of money. And so it's much harder for police to detect. But it's happening on the street too. And I just had a great discussion with this task force agent that I'm working with on this article. And I said to him, well, why are these guys, judges, police officers, attorneys, athletes, famous athletes. They've had a number that they've identified. Why are they doing this? Why are they taking this risk? And he said it's because they know that that person's going to leave. They have no fear of them like trying to blackmail them and say, well, if you don't pay me 10,000, I'll tell your wife. That isn't going to happen on the street. So they go there as a source, but it's beyond I don't understand how that would be in any way attractive, in any way fulfilling, but.
Time. But on that note, I just had one question. How does this human trafficking, sex trafficking relates to different cultures? And is it like, from my understanding, what you're saying, with all the other top people doing it, keeping people from other countries come in as they are the vulnerable population, right? So either they might be deported or they don't have option to work and they just kept in illegal status to do these kind of things, don't you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, that's part of it. And from what I understand, I was talking to an agent in Columbus. A lot of the times, the women who are brought in from other countries end up in the massage parlors. He said to me they should have an entire task force just for massage parlors, because that's typically where that happens. Here, it's people from this community. It's Americans. It's your next door neighbor's daughter. It's, it could be anybody. It isn't necessarily an immigrant or someone who's here illegally, although that does happen. But and it's also in every country, in every state. So it's pretty universal. It isn't just, like you see in the Hollywood movies. It isn't just a white van pulling up and snatching somebody. They spend a lot of time grooming kids, especially it's been a problem during the pandemic because more kids are spending time online. And the pimps reach out to them there and they contact 100 kids and they get one, they're happy. So and they go to public libraries. They have people who recruit for them in the schools. They're very kind of savvy in how they can find those people who are vulnerable and who might need money or whatever it is they need, drugs. And they leverage that and get them to prostitute themselves. And so, but anyway, to answer your question, yeah, there are people who get taken advantage of because they're immigrants and may not be here illegally, or so they can be blackmailed easily and forced into prostitution.
I'm glad you brought up the pandemic real quick, because one of the things that opened my eyes, like I wasn't even aware of it. One of our last guests that Melissa and I had on the show talked about landlords in New York City who were using their positions to, get sex from some of their tenants because they, nobody has money because they couldn't go back to work. And just how this condition that everybody's going through has exacerbated all these other problems that were always kind of there. And so, like, if there's somebody out there that wants to help, if there's somebody out there that's like, this sounds terrible, what can I do? I'm just one person. Like, what would be your advice to, that guy or girl out there that wants to help bring awareness and end this disease of human trafficking?
I think the best place to start nationally is the Polaris Center. And if they Google them, they can find all the information. Because I do a lot of work with people in Cleveland and in Ohio because I'm here. If you're in other parts of the country, I would say start with Polaris, and they'll kind of guide you to how you can help, or the trafficking hotline that you can share with people. That's probably the best starting point. The drug epidemic, the opioid epidemic has also caused problems. And there's to the point where parents are selling their kids to make money to support their habits. So yeah, it's pretty far reaching. Any place someone needs money, you're probably going to find it.
So unfortunate. Well, I hate to end it like this, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Nick.
Yes, and for those that are interested in the book or any of the other work that you've done with this topic, how can they find you, Christopher?
Well, they can go to my website, which is ChristopherJohnstonWriter.com. and I have the information there. Or you could just Google Shattering Silences by Skyhorse Publishers, and you can find it on Amazon. It's all over the place. So
I was about to ask that. Is your book on Amazon? Is it on Audible? Right now.
It's pretty easy to find online if you do, but you can just go to my website, ChristopherJohnstonWriter.com, and I'm on Twitter at @CChrisWright, SEE.
All right, sounds
thank
good.
you very much. Thank you for allowing me to talk about this. There are good things being done. I want to emphasize that. It seems like it's unsolvable, but there are ways to shut it down, and more ways to prevent it are being explored too, which is good.
Yes, we definitely thank you for coming on and speaking about this, Chris, because I think the more awareness that people have,
yes,
the better we can be equipped to finally one day end this thing. So we thank you for your time and for educating us and the folks out there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah, have a good day.
Okay, you too.
Yep.
All right,
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise. Stop, listen, share. Everyone can make a difference. We are on a mission. Everyone should do something greater in their lifetime. Change the future. Be a proud member. Join us to support, volunteer, and donate.